So hello and a very good evening to you all. Today is going to be another talkie because I feel terrible. Um, I haven't had a cold in over 2 years because of Corona. Obviously, a lot of people were kind of like self-isolating and stuff. And well, my self-isolation has come to an end now finally with my mum having moved, and so I've caught a cold, and I feel terrible. I've got a fever, but I still wanted to produce a well, it's a mild fever, and I've tested and I'm negative, so it's not corona. Um, but I wanted to do today's talkie anyway. I was going to switch on the camera and do all kinds of fancy things and stuff, and film the material that I was going to talk about, but now you just have to take my word for it that it looks really good. It's print on de well, it's not print on demand, it's print your own. So basically, even my printouts are not as beautiful as the original PDFs, which you can buy and which I want to advertise. But before I do that, first of all, number one, I'm not affiliated with the people who produce those materials that I'm going to talk about. B, I'm not going to get any money for this. C, I just think that it's awesome material and I just wanted to put out the word. Now, what am I going to do today? I'm going to talk today about so-called, well, let's backtrack. If you've been following the RPG side of things, you will have noticed that I have a series of English speaking RPG playthroughs on my channel, which are really two people games. And I play them with my partner in crime. So we play Call of Cthulhu and we play Midgard. Uh, and we also did one DSA, Choose Your Own Adventure solo, which I basically dungeon mastered and she played. And we've been doing this since 2000 and I want to say 19. So yeah, no, maybe, yeah, I think we did the first one in 2019, so it's been going on and going strong for a very long time now. And I, well, for me, that's not a weird thing in terms of that I've never thought that you cannot play RPGs with only one party member and one DM. I also believe that you can do your solo thing, although there are some people who will actually contest that and say it's not RPGing if you're doing it on your own, but I would say that it really also depends on what you can do because sometimes you just don't have anyone to play with, and then being able to solo RPG is great. But it also depends on what you enjoy. So, telling a story by yourself, using dice to make decisions, using tables to make decisions, using oracles to make decisions. And of course, we've got Geek Gamers, Deborah, if you're listening to this, hi, um, who has built a whole channel around this and very successfully so, and who has also been producing very good books that you can buy now, and they're great. And I'm going to put a link to them in the description. But basically, this whole playing one-on-one has a name, and I didn't know. What I did know and have known for a while now is that even in I want to say in AD&D, TSR brought out adventures that you could play with one DM and one player. So in the world's greatest role-playing game, D&D, this is not a new thing. This, there was official material brought out in the 90s, I want to say, that was specifically geared towards um, playing with just one player and one DM. And of course, in fifth edition, we have the Dragons of Icespire Peak, I want to say. That's a box set, which I happen to own. I didn't even realize that I owned it. I can't remember buying it, but I must have because I also don't think anybody gave me this as a gift because I brought it over from Ireland. And that, I've never really actually read it. I've just opened it and looked at it, but apparently that can be played with one player as well. And I checked, and it actually says players two to, I want to say six or seven, because you can also play it with a whole party. So anyway, this whole thing isn't new. First of all, number one. Number two, it's not something that I created or invented or we created and invented, but it's been around for a good while. And now I found out that there's a name for it, and that's DnD Duets when it's Dungeons and Dragons, or RPG Duets. That's a thing, and that's a name. And I would like to talk today about DnD Duets. Now, this is, first of all, a website, but it's also games, it's also adventures that you can buy from that website. And I'm going to link the website in the show notes. But you can also go to DM's Guild and look for the authors. And the authors, it's a husband and wife couple, Jonathan and Beth Ball. They have published stuff under the Grove Guardian Press imprint. I'm not sure if this is their own imprint or if this is um, an imprint that also publishes other things. And they have dedicated a whole website and lots of material, both primary and secondary material. And I would like to shout out to Runehammer, because his his division between primary and secondary uh, role-playing materials is actually the one that I will use. So he considers secondary anything that describes it, that is meta, that is about it, and then you've got the primary, the source, as it were, where you have like the Holy Grail, the actual thing that's happening at the gaming table, plus any materials that you need to make it happen. So I would say writing adventures and the actual adventures themselves are primary materials, as are maps, etc. And what do you get when you go to that website? Well, first of all, you get a lot of free content, and that is really great because they explain what it means if you play a role-playing game instead of with multiple characters in a party with multiple players, but just one player and one DM. They first of all even take you through mechanics like action economy. This is a term that I wasn't familiar with, although I'm kind of familiar with the concept, as is everyone. When you take a look at D&D and you look at a monster, the monsters have CRs. Those are the challenge ratings. And the challenge ratings will usually tell you how difficult it is to fight such a monster. And there is also a chart in there where you can convert CRs and look at the number of player characters you have in your, or characters plus NPCs that might engage in the combat situation, their level of experience, etc. And then you can kind of come up with a scale that will allow you to build easy, medium, difficult, and deadly encounters, depending on what you're looking for. And I've used the CR when I first DM'd my first D&D game, which is only available to patrons. So, and it's also only available in German. And I nearly killed one of the characters because I followed the CR rule and it just didn't work. Why did it not work? Because I didn't know about action economy. And what action economy actually is you don't just look at the CR or you can completely disregard it. When you build an encounter and you say, okay, well, I've got those 8 rats, 8 rats, you can easily take them down. You've got 2 PCs, no problem at all, blah, 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 rats, go into the cellar, hunt some rats. The problem is you've got 8 rats and they get 8 attacks. Your PCs only get 2 at level 1. If they miss both, they're in deep trouble because the rats have 8 possible hits, whereas we only have 2. And in RuneQuest, actually, in the starter set, they completely forgot about action economy because I'm going to do a review of the RuneQuest adventures in the starter set. I died in the first round. In one of the um, encounters, I was actually trying out the combat system, and I followed it by the book, using two of the pre-gens from the box. And I was like, I cannot even imagine that this is possible. And of course, it wasn't. One of the characters died in the first round because the action economy was completely ignored. So basically, when you look at encounters and combat um, with the 8 rats, that can be deadly because if they fail, if both or if the one character fails their initiative, it fails their attack, and the other one as well, but all of the rats hit, your level 1 characters will probably be dying. And if both of them are at 0, neither of them can heal the other or stabilize them. So then, that's it. So that's one of the things that they explain. They also explain what to look out for and how to scale. They also, and this is something that you get as a supplement, you can buy it separately, they also produce something that they call like, it's like henchmen or followers in AD&D. It's where the main character that is played by the one player gets help. So they get a companion or 3. It can be N companions. And basically, they build in one of the supplements, they show you how to build such a companion. So they're not fully statted, so you don't get a full character sheet for them, although I'm pretty sure you could make it, but they basically are stat blocks. And they are kind of, if you like, characters that they are like NPCs, they do have some backstory, but the idea is that they become part of the party and then interaction ensues. So obviously the DM will then take them. So they're a DM PC, as it were, but it's the interaction that the PC instigates with this character that they meet that then produces this group feeling. And for those of you that go, well, that can't work, well, let me assure you it does, because that's what we're doing both in Alice and in Daughter of Alaba. It does work. I play one of the 2 characters, and QTV plays the other, and it actually works really well. Um, and they basically give you ideas of how to build them. They give backstories, they give backgrounds, but also character classes that suit. And that's what I really like. So if somebody really says, oh, I want to play, and in this case I have to say it's geared towards D&D, but I will talk about whether this could be done in a different system in a second. But of course they use D&D first of all, and I've spoken about this in another talkie, that D&D is probably the most, 5th edition I would say, is probably one of the most accessible role-playing systems that's out there. Number one, first of all, you can get it everywhere. It's not like one of those really uh, maybe interesting but hard to get or almost out of print or constantly out of print materials that you find somewhere else. They have a print run, they do a Kickstart, and then they're gone from the market. They may be excellent, but you can't get your hands on them. They are also translated, which is very important because a lot of really good books simply never see the light of day in a foreign language. And if English isn't a language that you're conversant in and proficient in, you can't really use them. And of course, you can get it everywhere, and I would say the price point is very affordable. So these are all considerations why using 5e is a good thing if you're trying to bring people into the hobby. And if you say, okay, well, I've got these two people who would like to engage in this, but they need a rule set, and they also may need ideas of how to run this, or even more than ideas, they may need adventures to run. Here's what we offer. And that's what they do. So I really like the website. Also, I think it looks marvelous. I really like it. And now I would like to start talking about at least one adventure because, full disclosure, I have taken part in their Would you like a free adventure? Sign up to the newsletter challenge. So I've got that adventure, but I haven't read it yet. It's for 5th level characters, or for a 5th level character, and it's for 5e. But I've also bought a book. It's a print-on-demand book, which consists of one-shots, which have kind of like a little bit of a fairy tale touch. And I really am looking forward to this. And apparently I'm going to get it by the 19th of October. So today is the 11th. So if this holds true, it'll be in my hands in 8 days. But in order to talk a little bit about their product, I've bought one short adventure. It's about 18 pages. And anyone who plays on my, and I really mean this, if you are a player on my channel, I would like you to stop listening now. Because I am fully going to run this with you guys. But I don't want to give it away. So I would appreciate it if you could switch off now. So, because when you just even look at the title, you know exactly what the game is about. So don't tell this to your players. It is called Land of Vampires, a duet campaign for 5th edition, campaign intro, 2 adventures, levels 1 and 2. So basically, Jonathan and Beth have written a campaign levels 3 through 10, and it's set in their own world. I'm going to talk about this, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about what happens in the adventure, at least from what I can tell with regard to foreshadowing of the actual campaign, because of course this is a prelude that you don't need to play. You can also just start with the actual campaign. And it may remind you guys, if you have played anything in Dungeons and Dragons and have been following Dungeons and Dragons, not even 5th edition, but even prior editions, and it will look and sound not unfamiliar, but that doesn't mean that it's not original, because it is. And of course, anyone who talks about vampires should tip their hats to Varney the Vampire, but as well Bram Stoker and Der Vampyr, etc. So none of this is actually original. As soon as you've got vampires, you can go back to ancient Greece, because that's when they had them first. So, first of all, Beth and Jonathan have created their own world. It's called Azuria. Now, unfortunately, I don't have a world description. I don't know if they've ever published one, but I do hope they will, because I love it. I want to know more about this world, and I'm going to explain to you why later. Well, Azuria has at least one continent called Caldara. Caldara, I'm just wondering, that sounds familiar. Isn't that part of a volcano? Isn't there a part of a volcano that's called Caldara? Anyways, so there's at least one continent, and this one is called Caldara. And the story starts in Caldara. And here I'm going to tell you what's going to happen. In this story, the PC will find out that the children that have been disappearing in the city, and it's a city that is explained, it's described, not in too great detail. So if you've ever read detailed descriptions of cities like, let's say, Greyhawk in the Greyhawk campaign box. We've got a whole city mapped out, and of course it's a lot bigger. Or maybe even more recently, Johnstown in RuneQuest in the starter set. Jonestown is actually really nicely described and it's detailed. It's not like that. It's not as detailed as all that, but then again, this city is not going to be the main part where the adventure takes place. It is the, shall I say, starting point, the springboard. So essentially what happens is, in this city, children have been disappearing. And there are different ways in which the PC can be drawn into the story. And they make very many suggestions with regard to backgrounds that would suit for the PC to get involved. So it could be that they are somebody who has actually lost a child, or someone close to them has lost a child. And again, they are very, very sensitive about this. They say, first of all, it's a dark campaign, and it is. And it deals with children going missing, and fair warning, children actually not coming back. Children being turned into vampires, which in and of itself is, of course, a very, very creepy theme. Vampires don't have that big a creep factor for me personally. I don't find them very terrible. I'm more terrified of ghosts, especially Japanese ghosts. They are really creepy. Um, but children vampires are something that I cannot accept in my head. They terrify me. They are terrible. I don't know what it is, but I remember watching Near Dark, and Near Dark is a super film, but they've got this little vampire boy, and he basically I just cannot even think of him and about him. It was terrible, but the film is good. Anyways, so fair warning, be careful. There are themes in this game that you may not want to bring to the table. So if that's not for you, I'll wait for the fairy tale book and then I'll review that. And I'm pretty sure that's going to be a lot less harrowing. But anyway, so basically the PC gets drawn into this whole story of the children going missing. He could be, or they could be a member of the city guard that starts investigating. They could be a vampire hunter who knows that there is something going on. She's kind of like in the shadows. They could be somebody, like I said, who has lost a child, and there are different ways in which they can be brought in. They could be a noble, a member of the nobility, who has a friend who has lost a child, or they could even be related by marriage to the main villain. I mean, yeah, they've really given this a lot of thought. And basically, as the story unfolds, what you find is you go investigating and you find information. And while they don't follow the 3-clue rule, they do follow the 2-clue rule, which is much better than the 1-clue rule. Basically, since this is an investigation beginning, they make sure that no matter what, the investigation will proceed. It may stall and it may take a little longer, it may take more interactions, but they have means and ways of ensuring that our investigators, the PC, gets to where they need to be, and that's underneath the castle. Because underneath the castle, they find a survivor, Lily, who tells them that she has been abducted by some man, and it's easy to identify him because he's a noble of the city who usually lives on kind of like an estate called Nocturne, down, down, down. and who has been in the city, but who left a couple of days ago. And well, basically, she tells them that he suddenly had very long teeth, and he locked her in with a group of children with also very long teeth, which in and of itself is creepy as hell. And she runs and she hides, and she manages to basically hide from the vampire spawn. And so you've got a lead. So, but even that investigation takes a while. You've got a tavern to go to. You've got a couple of um, uh, city guards that basically had a really strange encounter, which they reported to their higher ups and were sacked as a result. There are also two ambushes for the PC, again with warnings around how to scale and how to make sure that it works. And in the process, and this is really what this prelude is about, and they also say it, it's about making it possible for the PCs to gain companions. So they meet different people during the investigation, and they can choose to take them along. They are very different. We've got a smith, we've got an apothecary, we've got a member of the city guard, and we later find a vampire hunter, and we find someone that I'm not quite sure what or who they are. And they're also statted. So there are different people you can encounter at different times, which I love. I love because it really happens organically. You meet those people organically. And I really like that. They've really put in a lot of thought. So basically, first of all, you do the investigation. You find out about the big bad, and the city guard actually tells you, the commander of the city guard, we will put together a contingent of soldiers, but it's going to take a while because, I don't know, the soldiers are off soldiering somewhere else or something. But go ahead, will you do us a favor and will you go and spy on this guy? Will you, because he may run, so we need somebody to follow him because we cannot just leave. I don't know if they give a reason why it takes them a while to put together a small contingent. I can't remember. I don't think they do, but hand wave it or basically make up your own story around this. So basically, you hopefully the PC says, yes, I'm going to do this. There are ways of making them say yes in terms of really upping the stakes. This is all about upping the stakes. Like, for example, even advice. They find a companion, they work with them, and then the companion gets killed. Yep. And then you have a wilderness or you have a wilderness or road trip. And usually a lot of people go, oh my God, traveling, that's terrible, blah, 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 blah. However, they have encounter tables, and they've got two. And they are the loveliest encounter tables I have ever seen. They are of such high quality. They really speak to me because they are not your, okay, you encounter one wood spider. Okay, on a roll of a 5 on a D6, you encounter two wood sprites. On a roll of a 3 on a D6, you encounter a werewolf. It is completely different. And I'm just going to read you two randomly chosen encounters. I mean, maybe it's just the child in me, but I really, really love them. Then again, I love fairy stories and I love telling stories, so, this is so me. Yeah, and I'm going to be 50 next year, but we don't tell this to anyone. So, here we are. We have two lovely, lovely encounters. I will pick one from the road table, and I'm going to take number 3. This is just basically by chance. 3. A gleeful cry bursts forth from the edge of the bend ahead as a woman with puffy red curls spies the party. She bids them to come closer, and see what goods they might need. The side of the green card reads, Hattie's Hattery, and she is indeed Hattie, the finest hatter in all of Caldara. I mean, seriously? to meet a female Mad Hatter on the road. I mean, how awesome is that? So they had me like, I mean, they even had me uh, at that. I mean, some of them, not all of them are as colorful as this. So, for example, there is one where you simply meet a contingent of soldiers thundering by on horseback with an urgent message from King Arontis to the Hadvarian queen. A successful DC 13 charisma persuasion check convinces one of the soldiers to share that the king is sending a warning about a vampire on the loose. That's, that would be a plot driving thing, but it doesn't have to happen. But then you have a family of three centaurs clop down the road together, heading north. If asked, a successful DC 12 charisma persuasion check convinces them to reveal their destination to the party. The Vagra Vale Wood. I mean, Vagra Vale. I mean, even just the name rolls off your tongue. A remote druid conclave tucked away inside the Stormside forest. I mean, I love a place that has a Stormside forest. Anyways, so these are really nice. Then you, for example, an awakened tree hums happily to herself beside the road. If the party stops to talk to her, her eyes brighten. She promises them an apple for each riddle that they guess correctly, and should they manage three, an extra special treat besides. And that treat is actually something really nice because it's a really nice spell scroll. And then when you go through the forest, no, it's not all wood spiders and terrible things. It is, for example, on a roll of a 4, yeah, that's boring. It's bandits, but you can encounter a giant boar that attacks. But for example, um, I really like this one. I really like all of them. On a successful DC 12 wisdom perception check, a strange smell wafts through your nostril, damp, moss, and decay. As the party continues or investigates, a bundle of fey vines in front of them begins to shake. Beneath the vines, a wide-eyed green dragon wormling named Petunia stares up at the party. She became lost while playing hide and seek with her father, Cleobile, an adult copper dragon. A successful DC 13 wisdom perception or survival check allows the PC to retrace the wormling's steps to her father over the course of a few hours. Cleobile is so grateful that he gives the party a ring of the ram to thank them for returning Petunia safely. The first time the PC uses the ring, they discover that instead of a ram's head, I don't actually know what a ring of the ram does. I would have to look at this, because it's a thing in D&D. But the first time they use it, they discover that instead of a ram's head, the spectral form of a beautiful green dragon appears. The ring was enchanted by Cleobale to show the image of Petunia's mother, Drazia. I mean, that's just darling. I mean, seriously, that's just darling. Or you can also encounter another possible companion. The hair on the back of the PC's neck raises. Something watches them from the forest shadows. The leaves rustle. A furry beast leaps from the trees. A werewolf! Flecks of spittle fly from the creature's slathering jowls. Then, with a yelp, it falls, limp, onto the forest floor. The trees part again, and a tall woman in dark grey leathers steps out of the foliage. "My name is Valkyrie Thorn," she says in a low, husky voice, "and you've just interrupted my hunt." And then it goes on to say, find Valkyrie's stat block, the vampire hunter companion, and backstory in the appendix. She is also hunting Nazark, which is the big bad, and would make a great ally to the PC on their journey. But you can also say that they basically encounter her later. Basically then, you come to Nocturne, you do a little bit of research, but there isn't really much to research because here basically between finding Lily and solving the first issue and then moving on to Nocturne, the character would level up from 1 to 2, and so would the companion. However, the main thing now is that this is a prelude. So the idea is that they need to go to where vampires dwell, and they don't dwell in Azuria, they dwell somewhere else. They dwell in a land that was ripped from Azuria, and now people will go, that's like Barovia. It is. It's even like Barovia with regard to it's governed by a head evil uber vampire. The sun doesn't really rise. It's always misty, blah, blah, blah. So yes, it is Barovia, at least on the surface. Since I haven't read the rest of the adventure, I can't really tell how like it is. But yes, it is definitely influenced by Barovia. But that doesn't matter because, I mean, seriously, Barovia wasn't invented out of thin air. They based it on other things. They were influenced by other things, the Hickmans. And it's fine. I mean, I don't really have any problems with that. So basically, the idea is that this big bad has reinvigorated a strong dead vampires, and I mean really dead vampires bloodline by entering into some kind of pact and then drinking his blood from a vial that he found somewhere. But the problem is he needs to go to the place where the vampires dwell. And he cannot do this because in order to do this, he kind of almost needs to die, but he can't kill himself because there's this rule that vampires cannot really harm themselves. So he almost needs to die. So he wants the party to attack him and bring him down by 30 hit points, which then leads to him to bleed out. And it's really nicely described how then out of his blood basically is formed this portal through which he walks then. And then the party is supposed to follow, which is why you really have to put up the stakes. So they even suggest that maybe when they're encountering this big bad, the companion should die. So that, you know, this hatred for him, this enmity is really put deeply ingrained into the PC so that they will, you know, like not even think twice and just jump through and follow him into this other world where they then wake up and are now in this shadow world kind of demi-plane thing. And that's where the actual campaign starts, which I haven't got, which I will buy, which I haven't read yet. But this is basically what you get for $4.99. So first of all, that's super. I mean, that's really good. You do have to print it yourself, but I will tell you, you get maps. And the maps, you could even just put them into Roll20 if you wanted to. It wouldn't be an issue at all. You have the stats for the self-made what you call it, monsters. You have the stats for possible companions. And also they use a couple of monsters from 5e SDR, and I have no idea what SDR stands for because it's not the monster manual, it's not the player's handbook, it's not the Dungeon Master's Guide. I don't know what SDR is because I don't know, it's not Van Richten's Guide to something, it's not Tasha's Cauldron, it's not Xanathar. I don't know what SDR stands for, but basically if you just look for Spectre, and there is another thing that you can encounter, Will-o'-the-Wisps, I think is actually in the monster manual and so on. But you will find the stats, that's not a problem. But they also give you advice on how to use them, because at least the Spectre can do some kind of life drain, and they say that this is very dangerous for people at level 1, so be careful of that. So they actually tell you what to do. They also tell you what kind of checks you could ask for. They also tell you that if a check fails, so for example, in the first instance, you have to do an investigation where you have to follow footsteps. So first of all, you have to see, do you see the villain? You might miss your perception check. If you do, then you still have a chance to see the footsteps. If you miss those as well, you would normally be stuck. But you know, there are different things that the PC could do. They could actually call for help. Then the city guard arrives. Then they would give you that they would start looking. So then they would say, oh, look, there is footsteps, and then they can pick it up from there. So basically, they also have kind of like a mitigation, what you call it, mitigating uh, um, strategies and factors that you can bring in order to ensure that you can play the game and that it isn't a terrible failure for the player. Because of course the player, especially if you're on your own, you only have a limited number of things that you can do. And so, of course, this adventure is written generically for, in theory, a normal PC that has only very basic stats, because of course they don't know. So it doesn't call for somebody to be able to do magic, to be able to fly, for example, or something like that, because they don't know if the PC will be able to do this. However, of course, depending on what kind of a character the the player is playing, you can of course adapt them. You can of course say, well, you know, you could use this skill, or they could use that spell, or that ability, you know, that kind of thing. So of course they don't know, so they give you the most basic possible solutions to a problem, which any character should at least be able to take a shot at. So what is the conclusion of all of this? First of all, RPG duets are a thing. I can highly recommend them because they're great fun. And if you want to try your hand at this and don't feel like trying to build all of this on your own, I advise you to check out their website and take a look at, well, I mean, you can get the free adventure. The problem with the free adventure is, of course, it is a 5th level adventure. So if you've never done this before, if you haven't played D&D before, starting at 5th level is a bit of a problem, because by then you will already have, you would create a 5th level character, which is not so easy, especially if it's a magic user. I think that's, I mean, maybe one drawback. But I just remembered something. On DM's Guild, you can get 3 consecutive adventures, levels 1 through 3, for free from Beth and John Ball. So you can just go there and download those for free. It's pay what you want. Of course, you can pay them, but in theory, if you don't want to, you don't have to. They would help you out there. Now the question is, could you play this in a different could you play this in a different system? And yes, you can. It's not a problem at all. You just take the story. You would then just have to find monsters if they don't have specters or something like that. Although I think most fantasy settings have something like a ghost, like a spirit specter kind of thing, and just use them. But the mechanics are the same. You would have to transform the companions and build your own around them and make your own stats. But again, if it's a system that you're familiar with, because why else would you want to transfer it, then that won't be a problem. But you can just, in inverted commas, just take the story, and it would work in any system that I'm familiar with. Having said this, the way it's written and so well prepared, using 5th edition rules is going to be the easiest and most accessible way, especially if you're new to this whole thing. And so this only leaves me to recommend a couple of things. Number one, DnD Duets. Check out the website, but also a little reminder of Geek Gamers and their solo role-playing game channel, because it is great. And that's all from me for today. It is almost 45 minutes long, and I hope you enjoyed it, and keep gaming, but also try to stay safe and don't get ill. Okay, talk to you soon. Bye.